The stars were quiet that night, silent watchers in the endless dark. The great human starship, the Resolute, drifted with pride across the void. It was not just a ship. It was a promise that humanity had learned to stand among the stars without fear. Soldiers trained in its halls, scientists studied in its chambers, and families of the crew trusted its walls to keep them safe. But silence in space never lasts. It began as a faint signal. The crew on the bridge leaned forward, trying to read the strange pattern. At first it looked like interference, static. Then, without warning, the radar lit up with dozens of contacts. Unknown ships fast, closing in. The captain's voice cut through the confusion. "Shields up. All hands to battle stations." Red alarms echoed through the ship's corridors. Soldiers strapped into their stations. Engineers ran toward the reactors. Medics prepared for the worst. The hum of engines grew louder as the Resolute braced for war. Then came the first strike. An alien torpedo screamed across the darkness, glowing like fire against the black. It hit the starboard side, tearing through metal and steel. The wall shook. Lights flickered. Crew members fell to the floor. Smoke filled the air. Outside the viewports, the enemy revealed itself. Sleek alien warships, covered in sharp black armor, their weapons glowing with an eerie blue light. The crew had never seen anything like them. The captain shouted orders. "Return fire!" Cannons lit up, blazing red lines across space. Human missiles streaked out, exploding against alien shields. Some ships shattered, but more kept coming. For every alien destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear. The sound of metal groaning filled the ship as another explosion ripped through its hull. Inside the engineering base, sparks flew as consoles burst. Engineers fought to hold the power grid, sweat running down their faces. One whispered almost to himself, "They knew exactly where to hit us." The aliens were not striking randomly. They were targeting weak spots, areas carefully chosen to cripple the ship. Deck by deck, the starship fell into chaos. Fires burned through the lower levels. Airlocks hissed open to the void, sucking out crew members before emergency doors slammed shut. Medics carried the wounded through smoke-filled corridors, their faces pale with fear. On the bridge, the captain stood tall, but even his voice trembled now. "If we fall here, humanity falls with us." A sudden impact shook the command deck. Screens went black. The main reactor had taken a direct hit. The heart of the Resolute was failing. Without it, shields dropped. Weapons dimmed. The aliens circled like wolves around a wounded beast. For a moment, it seemed all was lost. Then the ship's cannons roared one last time. A desperate blast ripped through 2 alien cruisers, sending them into flames. But it was not enough. Another alien torpedo slammed into the hull. This time, the explosion was deafening. Entire sections of the ship tore away, drifting into the void like broken bones. The crew looked out through shattered glass and saw pieces of their home scatter into space. The captain gripped the command rail, his knuckles white. This ship was built to be a symbol." His voice lowered. "But tonight it will be a tomb." And then the alien flagship moved closer. It was enormous, dwarfing the human vessel. Its cannons glowed, charging for the final strike. In that moment, silence fell again. The crew realized they were staring at their end. Some closed their eyes. Others whispered names of loved ones far away on Earth. A few clenched their fists, refusing to bow to fear. The final blast came like the roar of a dying god. The ship shook violently. The bridge collapsed. Flames consumed the main deck. One by one, systems shut down. Darkness covered the once proud hulls of the Resolute. The stars watched as humanity's greatest ship fell, torn apart in the void. But even in the ashes, something stirred. Survivors drifted in escape pods, their eyes burning not with despair but with rage. They had seen their strongest ship destroyed. They had watched their comrades die. And in that fire, a vow was born. A vow whispered in the silence of space. "We will not be forgotten. We will not be broken. We will build again. And when we return, they will remember." The aliens thought they had ended a chapter of human history. They did not know they had just begun the most dangerous one. Because from the wreckage of the Resolute, a new ship would rise. A warship unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, and it would carry the fury of all humanity in its steel heart. The wreckage of the Resolute drifted silently in orbit. Broken steel floated like corpses of giants, twisted and lifeless. Sparks burned weakly in the dark, fading one by one. But among the wreckage, small escape pods glowed faintly as they made their way toward hidden bases on the edge of human territory. Inside those pods sat survivors, exhausted, bloodied, and shaken. Yet their eyes carried more than grief. They carried fire. When they landed on the cold ground of a remote human outpost, the silence broke. Commanders and engineers rushed to meet them, pulling open the pod doors. Medics lifted the wounded away while others listened in horror as the survivors spoke. They came from nowhere. They knew where to hit us. They wanted to break us, and they almost did. The word spread across the base like poison. Humanity's strongest ship was gone. The symbol of their courage had been turned to dust. For a moment, fear rippled through the people. If the Resolute could fall, what chance did humanity have? But then one voice rose above the rest. It was Admiral Kalin, commander of the human fleet. His uniform was torn, his face marked with smoke and blood, but his voice was steady. He looked at the survivors, then at the engineers, then at every soldier standing in the hall. "They think this is the end," he said, his voice carrying through the silence. "They think humanity is broken. But I tell you this, they are wrong." The hall trembled with the weight of his words. "Aliens shattered our ship," Kalin continued, his fists slamming against the steel table. "But we will build another. Not just another ship. We will build a warship so powerful, so terrifying, that the galaxy will never forget humanity's name. We will not hide. We will not beg. We will rise, and when we do, the stars will burn with our vengeance." The room erupted. Soldiers slammed their fists against their armor. Engineers shouted in agreement. Even the wounded raised their hands, whispering oaths through clenched teeth. That night, the survivors carved their vow into history. They would rebuild not to survive, but to strike fear into the galaxy. Days turned into weeks. In secret bases carved into asteroids and hidden on barren moons, humanity began its greatest project. Blueprints spread across tables, drawn with shaking hands and burning eyes. The ship they designed was not one of peace, not one of exploration. It was war given shape. Engineers spoke of weapons that could tear through fleets. Scientists whispered about engines faster than anything the aliens had ever seen. Every person added their skill, their blood, their hope. It was not just a ship. It was vengeance forged in steel, but it was not easy. Resources were scarce. The alien attack had crippled supply lines. Cargo ships carrying rare metals often never returned. Every shipment of fuel was guarded by desperate escorts. Workers slept on the factory floors, refusing to rest while the ship was still unfinished. There were failures. Engines that collapsed under their own power, weapons that overheated and tore themselves apart, hull plating that cracked in the vacuum of space. Each time something broke, voices rose in anger and despair. But each time someone stood up and said the same words: "We cannot stop. We cannot fail." And so they pushed forward. Meanwhile, whispers spread across the galaxy. The aliens celebrated their victory. They mocked humanity, calling them fragile, weak, easy to destroy. On alien worlds, children laughed at stories of the fallen humans. Commanders boasted that Earth would soon kneel. But in the shadows, spies carried rumors. Rumors of human survivors working in silence. Rumors of a ship unlike anything ever seen. At first, the aliens ignored the whispers. But slowly, unease began to grow. What if humanity was not broken? What if they were building something greater? Back on Earth, the people waited in silence. Families who had lost fathers and mothers aboard the Resolute lit candles every night, their faces hard and cold. Children asked questions their parents could not answer. When would the new ship rise? When would vengeance come? Admiral Kalin walked through the construction yards one night, his boots echoing against the steel floors. He watched sparks fall from welders' torches. He listened to the steady hammering of workers sealing plates together. Every sound was a heartbeat, every heartbeat a promise. Beside him walked Mara, the chief engineer. Her hands were blackened with grease, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "They want it faster than possible," she said bitterly. "They want miracles." Kalin stopped, staring at the massive skeleton of the ship rising before them. "We do not have the luxury of time," he said. "If we delay, they will strike again. And this time they will not stop at one ship. They will burn Earth itself." Mara lowered her head. "Then we give them no choice. We finish this ship even if it kills us." Kalin's voice hardened. "Not just finish. We make it a weapon that will change everything." They stood in silence, looking up at the massive frame. For now it was only steel and fire, but soon it would become something more, something alive. As weeks passed, the vow grew stronger. It was no longer just soldiers and engineers who swore it. Farmers donated metals from their tools. Miners risked their lives to gather rare ores. Even children in the colony sent messages to the builders, their small voices carrying big words, "Make them afraid of us." The oath of vengeance became more than a promise. It became humanity's soul, and so the new ship began to rise from the shadows. Slowly, piece by piece, it grew into a shape unlike anything seen before. Its hull was darker, sharper, heavier. Its engines glowed with power stolen from alien science. Its cannons looked like thunder waiting to strike. Every rivet, every plate, every wire carried the memory of the fallen. Every scream heard in the fire of the Resolute lived in this ship's steel. When it was done, the galaxy would not look at it as a vessel. They would see it as a warning, the warning that humanity had been broken once, but would never be broken again. The first beams of the new ship rose like the bones of a giant. They floated in the vacuum of a hidden construction dock, carved deep into an asteroid field. Workers in heavy suits drifted through the dark, welding pieces together with sparks that looked like falling stars. At first, it was nothing but a skeleton of steel, cold, empty, lifeless. But day by day, piece by piece, it began to grow. The skeleton became a body, and the body began to look like something alive. This was no ordinary ship. Every worker knew it. Every engineer whispered about it as they worked long hours with bleeding hands. The hull was thicker than any ship humanity had ever built. The weapons mounted to its sides were not designed to defend. They were designed to end wars. The engines were built from both human science and stolen alien technology, glowing with a strange, fierce light. The galaxy had laughed when the Resolute was destroyed. But when this new ship was finished, no one would laugh again. The construction was not without pain. Engines overheated and tore themselves apart in testing. Hull plates cracked when pushed against the pressure of simulated space battles. Once, a massive reactor overloaded, sending a shockwave through the dock. Dozens were injured, some died. For a moment, fear gripped the builders. But then Admiral Kalen came to the dock. He walked among the wounded, looked them in the eyes, and said only this: "Every sacrifice here will be remembered when the galaxy kneels before us." And so they continued. Sleep was a luxury no one could afford. Workers lay on the cold steel floors of the dock, closing their eyes for only minutes before returning to their posts. Food was short, but no one complained. They ate what little they had, then returned to the fires of construction. It was not just duty that drove them. It was memory. Each person carried the face of someone they had lost aboard the Resolute. And with every rivet hammered into the new hull, they whispered a name, fueling the ship with ghosts. Mara, the chief engineer, became the heart of the project. Her voice carried across the docks like steel itself. Check the plating again. Run the fuel lines twice. No mistake is small. Every mistake kills. Her hands were always black with grease, her eyes red from exhaustion. But she never stopped, not once. She was seen more as a machine than a woman now, moving from station to station, demanding perfection. Sometimes in the dead hours of the night, Mara would stand alone before the massive unfinished hull. She would rest her hand against the steel and whisper, "You will not fail us. You cannot fail us." As the months dragged on, the ship began to reveal its true shape. It was not sleek like alien vessels. It was not elegant. It was something else entirely, something brutal. Its hull was jagged, heavy, layered with armor that looked like mountains of black iron. Its weapons were monstrous, rows of cannons larger than houses. At its core lay reactors that pulsed like beating hearts, drawing power from forbidden sciences. The workers started calling it by a name whispered in secret: the Revenant. A revenant was something that rose from death to take revenge. The name fit too well to be ignored. Soon the name spread, until everyone spoke it openly. The ship was no longer just metal, it was a symbol. When the engines were finally tested, the entire dock trembled. Lights flickered. The sound of raw power shook the steel walls. The engines roared like thunder, like something alive, ready to leap forward into the stars. Workers cheered, their voices echoing in the dock. For the first time since the Resolute had fallen, there was hope. But there was also fear. The power of the ship was immense, greater than anything humanity had ever controlled. If it failed, if even a single system broke in battle, it could destroy itself and everyone aboard. It was a gamble with the future of their entire species. Admiral Kalen stood before the crew as the ship's frame towered above them. His voice was calm, but his words burned with fire. They called us weak. They thought they ended us. But we are still here, and now we build a weapon the galaxy will never forget. When this ship takes flight, humanity will rise from the ashes, and our enemies will learn fear. The aliens far away began to notice strange signals in the dark. Fleets sent scouts to investigate, but none returned. Rumors spread. Whispers grew. Something was happening in the asteroid belts. Something vast. Alien commanders laughed in public but whispered in private. What if the humans were building something? What if the destruction of the Resolute had not broken them but reborn them? Finally, after endless days of work, the ship stood completed. It filled the dock like a beast too large for its cage. Its hull gleamed black under artificial lights as if it had swallowed the very void around it. The cannons lined its sides like a row of teeth. The engines pulsed with energy, their glow casting eerie shadows on the faces of the builders. The crew gathered before it, their hearts pounding. They had built the impossible. They had forged humanity's answer. And now they would set it free. Mara's voice broke the silence. Activate engines. The dock filled with sound. The floor shook. Dust fell from the steel beams above. The engines roared like storms tearing through the stars. The ship moved, slow at first, then steady, gliding forward out of the dock and into the void. The Revenant had been born. As it drifted into open space, silence fell over the workers who watched from the dock windows. Their eyes were wide, their faces pale. It was not just a ship. It was vengeance given form. The stars seemed dimmer in its presence, as if even the heavens feared it. The oath of vengeance was no longer words. It was steel. It was fire. It was alive. And the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The Revenant drifted into open space like a predator waking from a long sleep. Its black hull absorbed starlight, making it look like a shadow more than a ship. From a distance, it was almost invisible, but up close, it was overwhelming. Massive, armored, alive with power. Inside, the crew stood at their stations, their faces pale with tension. Many were survivors from the Resolute. Their hands trembled as they touched controls, but their eyes burned with the same fire that had brought them here. Admiral Kalen stood on the command deck, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. He was silent for a long moment, then finally spoke. Today we return. Today the galaxy will remember humanity. The crew answered with a single word spoken like a vow. Aye. The Revenant's first mission was not to defend. It was to strike. Intelligence had tracked an alien fleet moving through the Helios sector, a fleet of warships larger than the one that destroyed the Resolute. They were preparing for another assault on human colonies, eager to crush the last embers of resistance. But this time, the aliens would not meet a wounded fleet. They would meet the Revenant. The journey was silent, tense. The ship's engines cut through space with steady roars. Every vibration could be felt through the steel floors like the heartbeat of a giant. In the mess hall, soldiers whispered prayers. In engineering, Mara checked the reactors again and again, her hands shaking from exhaustion. She knew if the engines failed in battle, the dream would die with them. Finally, the fleet appeared on sensors. Dozens of alien cruisers, their weapons glowing, their formation tight. They were waiting, ready to destroy whatever humans dared to face them. On the bridge, the crew stared at the screen. Fear rippled through them, but behind it was something stronger. Rage. Kalen raised his hand. All weapons ready. Cannons charged. Missiles locked onto targets. The hum of power filled the air like a storm waiting to break. Engage. The first shot from the Revenant tore through the void. A beam of energy brighter than the sun streaked forward, slamming into an alien cruiser. The ship did not just break. It vanished in fire, torn apart in a single strike. The crew gasped. They had seen human weapons before, but never this. This was not defense. This was annihilation. The aliens scrambled, breaking formation. Their ships turned to unleash a storm of fire, blue and white beams cutting across space. Dozens of blasts slammed into the Revenant's hull. The ship shook violently. Sparks flew from consoles. Warnings blared across the bridge. But when the smoke cleared, the hull still stood. The armor held. Mara shouted from engineering, her voice breaking through comms. Shield stable. Hull integrity strong. She can take it. Kalen's voice was calm, almost cold. Then let them see what she can give. The Revenant roared back. Cannons unleashed fire in all directions, tearing through alien shields as if they were paper. Missiles streaked out, chasing enemy ships like hunting wolves. Alien cruisers exploded one by one, their wreckage scattering into the void. Inside, the crew felt the shock of every blast, but they did not falter. Fear turned into fury. For every alien destroyed, cheers echoed through the ship. Still, the aliens fought hard. Their flagship, larger than the rest, moved forward with deadly speed. Its cannons glowed, charging for a devastating strike, the same type of strike that had destroyed the Resolute. The bridge fell silent. Everyone remembered that day. Everyone remembered the fire, the screams, the helplessness. Kalen stood tall. Target their flagship. All power to main weapons. The ship shook as the Revenant's reactor channeled raw energy into its forward cannon. Lights flickered. Consoles sparked. Mara screamed into comms. "The weapon is overloading. If it fails, it will tear us apart." Kalen did not blink. "It will not fail." The cannon fired. The blast was unlike anything seen before. A wave of pure destruction surged across the stars, tearing straight through the alien flagship. For a second, silence filled space. Then the ship erupted in a blinding fireball, fragments scattering in every direction. The crew shielded their eyes. When the light faded, the alien flagship was gone, destroyed. The battlefield fell quiet. Alien cruisers, once so confident, faltered. Some turned to flee. Others fired wildly, their aim broken by panic. The Revenant moved through them like a storm, cannons cutting, missiles chasing, leaving wrecks in its wake. The aliens had mocked humanity. Now they screamed in fear. One by one, their ships burned. Some begged for retreat signals. Others tried to vanish into hyperspace. But it was too late. The Revenant hunted them down with merciless precision. When the last alien ship fell silent, the crew sat in stunned silence. They had done it. They had faced the same enemy that once shattered them, and this time they had crushed it. Kalen looked around the bridge, his voice low but clear. "This is only the beginning." No one cheered. The silence was too heavy, too sacred. They had won, yes. But victory was born in fire and sacrifice, in the ghosts of the Resolute. The crew bowed their heads. They knew this was not the end of war. It was only a message carved in fire. Humanity was no longer prey. Humanity was no longer weak. Far across the galaxy, alien worlds trembled as news spread. Stories of the human warship, the one that could not be stopped, spread like wildfire. Commanders whispered in fear. Civilians spoke in awe. Children hid when they heard its name. The Revenant had become more than a ship. It had become a legend, and legends never die. The battlefield was silent now. Wrecks of alien ships drifted in the endless dark, their fires still burning weakly before fading into cold ash. Pieces of twisted steel floated past the Revenant, reminders of the chaos that had unfolded only moments ago. On the bridge, the crew sat in stunned silence. Their hands still trembled from the violence of the fight, their ears still ringing from the endless roar of weapons. But inside their hearts, something had shifted. For the first time since the Resolute had fallen, they did not feel like survivors. They felt like victors. Admiral Kalen stood in the center of the command deck, watching the stars beyond the viewport. His face was calm, his voice steady. "This is not only a victory," he said. "This is a message." The crew listened. To every alien who thought humanity was weak, to every empire that believed we would kneel, to every race that laughed when the Resolute burned. Let this wreckage remind them humanity is not broken. Humanity is reborn. The words cut through the silence like steel. No one cheered. The weight of his voice was too heavy. They only bowed their heads and whispered the same word together. Revenant. Across the galaxy, the story spread like fire. Traders carried tales of the human warship that had cut through fleets like they were nothing. Refugees spoke of the black vessel with glowing engines and cannons that roared like thunder. Alien commanders who once mocked humanity now spoke of the Revenant with fear in their voices. On some worlds, children woke from nightmares of its shadow. On others, rulers whispered about treaties, afraid to draw its wrath. The aliens had thought destroying the Resolute would crush humanity's spirit. Instead, they had created a monster that walked among the stars. But the ship itself carried more than weapons. It carried memory. Every plate of its armor reminded the crew of those who had died. Every weapon reminded them of the fire that had consumed their friends. The Revenant was not just a war machine. It was grief and rage turned into steel. Mara, the chief engineer, stood alone in the engine room after the battle. She placed her hand against the reactor, feeling its steady hum. Her eyes were tired, her voice soft. "You held," she whispered. "You carried us through, and you will carry us again." She closed her eyes, and for a moment, she thought she heard the voices of the fallen in the hum of the reactor. Silent, but present, forever part of the ship. On Earth, when news reached the people, silence filled the cities. Families who had lost loved ones on the Resolute lit candles again. This time not for mourning, but for strength. Children gathered around screens to see the first images of the Revenant gliding through space, its hull dark and terrifying. They did not see a ship. They saw a promise, but Kalen knew the truth. Victory was only the beginning. In the war room he stood before his commanders, his voice grave. The galaxy will not stay silent. They will come again, larger, stronger, desperate to erase the fear we have put into them. They will not forgive us for what we have done here. One commander asked, "Then what do we do?" Kalen's eyes narrowed. "We make them remember. Every time they raise their weapons, we will be there. Every time they try to burn us, we will burn brighter. Humanity has been scarred, but scars make us stronger." The room fell into silence. The oath of vengeance was no longer a secret. It had become their way of life. Not all cheered humanity's rise. In hidden corners of the galaxy, alien leaders gathered. Some swore they would destroy the Revenant at all costs. Others whispered that perhaps it was too late, that humanity had already risen beyond control. But all of them shared one thing: fear. The Revenant had shown them a truth they had never wanted to face. Humanity was no longer a small species struggling to survive. Humanity was a storm. Back aboard the ship, Kalen stood again on the command deck, looking out at the field of burning alien wrecks. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, waiting. He turned to his crew. "Do not forget what we are fighting for. We fight for the dead. We fight for the living. We fight so that no one will ever again think humanity is easy to break." His voice lowered, cold and final. "They wanted us forgotten, but we will be remembered," the crew answered in one voice, their shout shaking the steel around them. "Forever." As the Revenant's engines roared to life once more, it drifted forward, leaving behind the battlefield of ghosts. The wreckage of the aliens would serve as a monument, a warning carved into the stars. From that day, the galaxy whispered a new story. Not of a fallen ship, not of a broken people, but of a warship that carried vengeance in its heart. The Revenant, the ship they would never forget.